So, Michael from Bourke and Bouteloup Architects. This project is the CSIRO's Werribee Sensory Test Lab, which is at the Food and Agriculture campus in Werribee. This is the campus, a little grainy image, but it's a series of buildings all dedicated to food research and food production, and it's a quarantine site and is a food production site as well, as registered for that. The work we did is buried in this building here. It was, well, it was a series of bits, but we're going to be talking about this test laboratory here, sensory test space, and really, I guess the most important thing is to just explain a little bit about what happens in here, and the idea behind the design really was to curate a journey and an experience for those test subjects. So essentially they're tasting food and perhaps smelling it also. And there'll be two types of test subjects, those who are registered already and then those who are not, who are sort of randomly picked. And then they also would lease this facility out to large multinational food groups who do their own tasting. So the big manufacturers, Unilever, and the grain providers, and lots of Australian manufacturers, brand names you would know about. Those would come in through the main front doors here and would be either ushered into this briefing room through a secure space, or to another sort of holding room, if you like, and they come directly into a series of 12 test booths. There's a little clinical room where swabs and blood can be taken as part of it, and there's a prep kitchen, which is where the food is all prepared and passed through. Associated store at the back of the building is where there's a lot of food labs, where they have things like pasta, tensile testing machines, things like that. The space itself, there was, I guess, quite a bit of detail in terms of the activities that are done, being able to fit a tray and an iPad so that the people can all input their responses to what they're tasting and testing. And that was both within the booths and on the table. The table here was designed for group activities where testing would happen and they would discuss it, or also for briefings, so they'd be briefed before they're brought into the test space. And it also doubled as a video conferencing room. So we spent a bit of time looking at these booths in particular and how they're designed for the experience. So there's a little hatch with a pass-through, and they were designed to allow for accessibility and make it as an experience in terms of its minimising other sensory input. And there's an ISO standard for sensory test labs. It goes as far as limiting your colours, so there has to be zero hue and hue intensity, so they're only the greys, particularly on the booths. So that was something we embraced, and on the other, with a few exceptions, notably on the kitchen side. So there was, as the hatch was open, you'd get the sort of sense that of the activity of the kitchen on the other side. But otherwise, the booth itself is very plain. All of the laminates are greys. The space has to be, it's a biocontainment space, so we had a containment consultant involved, and everything's impervious materials and the like to suit it as a food facility. This was the briefing room. You can see the red, the colours. So we worked with this kind of offsetting the monotone of the whites and the greys with the occasional bits, particularly in the kitchen. So this sort of confectionery piece of joinery, which is sufficiently far away from what the tasting is. And the red glasses here are part of the equipment to mask the colour of whatever you're drinking. The adjacent room there, clinical room. So, and there's the other parts of the experience, so there's a positive air pressure so that there's no smells that come through from the kitchen. And then the colours which allow for masking of whatever's being tasted. So, for instance, if you were having broccoli, it would be greens to kind of mask some of the textures, but it varies depending on what the researcher's doing and what they want to conceal. And a large space, because they're generally large groups that all have to come in and be doing the same thing at the same time, and no one can have sort of preferential treatment, so moving them around with large doors. Some of the colours that were used to sort of offset things. So this is the food kitchen, which was all refurbished. The hatches were custom hatches. We got as much soundproofing as well as we could within the wall. So as I said, it's a complete sort of sensory experience. Or the sensory experience is all about the food. This is what it was previously. This slide's just a little errant, but and yeah, a whole suite of LED colours to suit, and a lot of these colours are used, surprisingly. The greens, the reds, the blues. And so on the inside, in terms of just kind of highlighting the transaction, if you like, or the action going to the taste booth, we highlighted it with colours on the other side. The custom joinery hatches, as I mentioned, and the theatrical kind of experience of is just highlighted by this transition on each side. And I think that's the last slide.